In just 2 years' time, our daily lives had changed drastically, and so had we.
Persepolis. Movie fans and animation fans will most likely recognize this as one of the first animated features to begin what eventually became a new annual tradition of them being strong competitors for the top prizes at film festivals and for the best animated feature category during awards season. Sure, they don't always win, but the recognition alone is enough to get them that global attention and be taken as seriously as their mainstream counterparts. That alone is a great prize that many indie filmmakers wish to earn. And back in 2007, one movie that was able to achieve that dream was Persepolis, based on the autobiographical graphic novels by Marjane Satrapi. As much as the books were highly praised, they were also known to be controversial, with numerous of attempts to be either censored or banned in US school districts. Although those are just angry American Karens senselessly shouting that they don't want kids under 18 to see literally anything that has darker skin or is more provocative than a slice of white bread on a plate. However, as the troublemaker that she wrote herself as in the books, Satrapi doubled down on her life story and teamed up with Vincent Perronneau to turn it into the animated feature that we're gonna look into today. And I'm excited for this moment, because while I'm coming in completely fresh and haven't even read the books, I've heard a lot of amazing things about this movie, and now I can have my chance to see what this is all about. And yes, I know I am very late for this experience, but I'm catching up on my indie animated movie watch list, and so far I'm making good progress. So now that we're looking back into Marjane's youth, is the movie as majestically grand as the ancient city it's named after was? Or will this review be a revolution against this film? Let's find out. The story. If there's one thing you should know about Marjane Satrapi, it's that her life started out rough. As a kid growing up in Iran, specifically during the late 1970s and early 1980s, she witnessed the Iranian Revolution unfold, which led to the fundamentalists to take over and enforce extreme nationalist laws upon the country, and the Iraq-Iran war that followed soon afterwards, presenting how the events not only impacted Marjane and her family, but also the long-term effects that followed her afterwards when staying in her home in Iran or living abroad in Vienna.
It's all just a game, a pointless...
You're the one who's full of Life's not a game, it's not pointless. There are people giving their lives for freedom, okay?
As you could tell from the context that I described, this is a movie that is, in layman's terms, political. And I know there are some who respond to anything that resembles the subject of politics the same way that people who are easily startled want to take care of spiders. However, for those who do have the maturity to not instinctively distance themselves from the subject, they'll notice how the film carries a strong message of what happens when one experiences major political events firsthand at a young age. During the revolution and the war, Marjane was still at a point in her life when she was still learning about the world around her. Because of how they directly affected her family, she had no choice but to have politics be a big part of her childhood. And as she grew older, while she never got the worst of the political consequences, she gradually noticed how the climate is affecting her and took away so much of her freedom that prevented her from living a regular life, and her response for each of those times is when push comes to shove, as they further develop her rebellious nature to resist living the orders established by the conservative fundamentalists.
You say there's no political prisoners, but from 3,000 under the Shah, we went to 300,000. How dare you tell such big lies?
However, that doesn't mean that the movie is mainly about Iran. After all, this is still Marjane's movie, as she spends years from her late childhood to her young adulthood trying to find her own freedom. But as she goes through different stages in her life, that is a lot harder to find than it seems. Even when you factor out the war and the political tension, her life in Iran comes with many restrictions and police surveying anyone and everyone to the point that being herself makes it next to impossible to express, like with her clothes or with her taste in music, without feeling like it's a crime. And when she gets out of those strict laws to live in Austria, those mental scars never leave her and make it difficult for her to fit in. which adds the extra struggle of accepting her identity as an Iranian.
When I say where I'm from, they treat me like a savage. They think we're all crazy fanatics who spend their time killing each other.
And you think that's a good reason to deny where you're from?
With many of its subject matter and Marjane's experiences, it sounds like a pretty heavy movie, and I'll admit that it is. There are moments when the tone could go dark to highlight the damages of war or the dangers of nationalism and religious extremism having power. And yet, the film only applies the right amount to make its point. Generally, the tone does have a careful balance of drama and comedy so that it knows when to get serious during the bad parts of her life. But at the same time, the movie sprinkles in a few funny moments to give itself a bit of sense of humor and help some of the enjoyment of the experience, even having a montage where she sings Eye of the Tiger.
Is the eye of the tiger, is the thrill of the fight, rising up to the challenge of a rival.
Horribly, I might add, but you get the idea of how the movie can have a little fun. Persepolis is a beautiful combination of a coming-of-age story about a woman getting in terms with her past in a war, and a social commentary about Iranian politics and the psychological consequences of experiencing their extremism. It's a life that's tough to actually experience, but it's very fascinating as a story. The animation. One of the most recognizable traits of Persepolis is its animation style that is not just hand-drawn, but also almost entirely in black and white. The fact alone that it's a 2D film released at a time when the industry dropped the medium in favor of producing computer-animated movies already makes itself stand out, but the use of being in black and white also makes itself a unique experience. I'll say now that there are a few times when color does appear in the movie, like in the beginning and the end, to emphasize that the scenes are set in the present. They also add that metaphorical texture that her past is all in black and white because the story is being told through Marjane looking back upon her life while she's at the airport.
A few days after I arrived, my mother's so-called best friend decided there wasn't enough room for me in their apartment and that I couldn't stay.
But when it comes to its signature style, it's meant to mostly resemble the pages from the novels that this was based on. I say mostly because it does have the goal of feeling like we're seeing a comic come to life, but the designs themselves are updated from the books to be more accommodating to the animators. I mean, it's nice that Satrapi was able to draw her own graphic novel, but I don't think these drawings will pass as the base for an animated film.
How could I have been so stupid? That deceitful bastard led me by the nose.
But back to the look, I'll say now that even if it's slightly different from its source material, it does succeed at capturing that comic look. The imagery is all flat and sacrifices most of the detail to help put more focus on the core of what actually matters in the film, such as the characters' emotions and the impact of Iran left on Marjane. However, they also come with their own set of challenges with its strict limitations. How can you present Satrapi's life when you can only use black and white? The animation team did admit that making this movie and meeting Marjane's demands were quite difficult, but I think they pulled it off quite well. It gives the movie a nice minimalistic approach where it got to be creative with how the characters are drawn and play around with open spaces when the artists want to give them a few details to make their outfits or their look distinct.
Goodness, dear, what are you doing here?
Well, I'm dead, right?
Oh, my poor child, you don't understand. Your time hasn't come yet.
At the same time, the use of black and white is not exclusively to look like a living graphic novel. In fact, it's also the reason why this is an animated film in the first place.
Si on faisait ça en image réelle, ça serait quelques bougnoules dans un pays et ça ferait tout de suite un film ethnique. Voilà, ça devient le problème de ces gens qui sont fous de Dieu, qui vivent ailleurs, etc. Alors que le dessin, par son côté abstrait, c'est le propos qui est universel, c'est-à-dire n'importe qui, c'est-à-dire une dictature, c'est une dictature, que ça se passe en Chili, en Chine, en Iran ou partout, c'est pareil. Et le dessin a suffisamment ce côté abstrait pour qu'on puisse se dire que ça peut arriver n'importe où.
Without color or distinct traits, it takes away what makes Iranians different from everyone else in the world. That their problems aren't exclusively Middle Eastern or in Islamic countries or third world. and that these are people like you who are suffering under an authoritarian regime that's at war, which can happen to any country, big or small, on top of removing the idea of race so that anyone could see Marjane for who she is instead of her nationality, which is well presented when she's in Vienna and looks just about the same as the Europeans.
I'd kill myself if my brother went out.
Shut the hell up, you stupid sluts! That's right, I'm Iranian, and I'm proud of it, alright?
Also, it proves its need to be animated by occasionally having surrealistic moments. They can range from expressing Marjane's emotions to visually explaining some of Iran's history. They not only help have some moments to express more creativity and have the film play around with them, but they also provide many of the film's humor to lighten up the mood when needed.
Then my face changed. My head got longer, my right eye bigger, and my chin followed. My right hand became enormous, then my left foot.
If there is one criticism to give here, it's that I wish it could have fully committed to its use of black and white. On their own, the backgrounds are nice to depict Marjane's environment in that same flat comic way. However, it does cheat with its frequent use of grays to add some detail. That wouldn't be much of a problem, but when you add the characters who are only black and white, I don't think they blend as well and take away some of the illusion that this is a living comic. Maybe what I said is minor and a bit of a nitpick, but it's just that one thing that could have made its style perfect.
Not now, okay? Please leave me alone.
Oh, no! You're not getting off that easy!
This is a strong example of using minimalism in animation. It may look simple with its lack of colors, but its artistry and the meaning behind it show that there is a lot more to its style. The characters. While the movie is primarily made with the characters speaking in French, I was curious and decided to check out the English dub for this review, since they did make that available and feature some recognizable names like Sean Penn and Iggy Pop in the cast. From my experience, I find the English version to be just okay. The main cast is pretty good and were able to perform their roles well to convey their personalities, but when it's someone outside of Marjane's family...
My son is a traitor! You fool! Follow my stupid brother, go ahead! But be warned, okay? You'll all end up with a bullet in your head!
They don't make the best version, to say the least. However, it's only during a handful of moments when the acting can sound weirdly bad, and they don't take away from the whole experience. I'd personally recommend to stick with the original French version, but if you're not a fan of reading subtitles, then the English dub is fine. Anyways, back to the main topic. As an autobiopic, and like I said before, this movie is primarily about Marjane Satrapi. When she was a kid, she enthusiastically wanted to get politically invested with the events that were happening, despite not fully understanding what was going on or that she was too young to get involved. But through her upbringing of resisting the Shah and later the far-right extremists, she grew to embrace counterculture and develop a rebellious attitude where she has no tolerance for order or anyone who gives her problems.
So it's true what people say. Iranians have no manners whatsoever.
It's true what they say about you. You were all prostitutes before you became nuns.
And with the high amount of sass that she contains, it does come with its own set of problems, making it a lot easier for her to get in trouble. Yet that same attitude is what makes Marjane so engaging to watch. She is the personification of resistance, and after years of witnessing the devastation caused by political extremism and war, all she wants is the freedom to be herself. At the same time though, while her past was hard, there is also a personal inner battle of accepting herself as Iranian. Being herself is one thing, but loving herself after everything she went through is a whole challenge in itself. That's why part of this movie is about self-acceptance. Even when you're still trying to figure it out, staying true to who you are will always end with the best outcome in the long run.
You're crying because you made a mistake. It's always hard to admit it when you're wrong, huh?
By the way, I want to add that Marjane being a woman is something that may seem small, but it actually helps strengthen the picture. It gives the movie an additional feminist layer to discuss about the misogyny under authoritarian regimes like the one in Iran, where the laws are a lot more restrictive towards women compared to men who make the rules more favorable for themselves. It's a good example of how Marjane isn't afraid to call out the hypocrisy and corruption with these conservative rulings.
I just don't understand why, as a woman, you don't think I'd be affected by the sight of men in skin-tight pants, yet you're worried they'll get turned on by a few less inches of veil?
When it comes to the other characters, Persepolis technically has a large cast, but the majority of them all come and go without telling us much of who they are or what role they play in her life. And even if they do have an identity, they're out of the film as soon as they come in. Like, just when you think Marjane's first lover would make a strong impact, lol, he realized he's gay after one night with her. Okay, thanks for coming, bye!
Thank you, Marjane. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The only other significant people is Marjane's family, who include her parents, who do the best they can to support her and keep her safe, Uncle Anoush, whose defiance of the government as a communist inspired her to be politically rebellious, which, by the way, communism is used in the film as a counterculture against the fundamentalists, and the excuse that extremists use to execute anyone with different ideologies than them, and Marjane's grandmother, who is her moral support by reminding her who she is and to love herself.
Don't ever forget it. Fear is what lulls our mind to sleep and makes us lose our conscience. Fear is also what turns us into cowards.
Most of the time, it's all about Marjane, but the movie does a wonderful job to go deep into her life that she is enough to carry the whole picture, along with sharing her perspective of what was happening in Iran. Most of the characters probably won't leave much of an impact, but the lead alone makes the movie worth it as she presents her story. It's not every day when you see an animated movie be so politically charged, but when they do, they come out with some epic results such as this. Persepolis is a powerfully great animated feature that brings to life the autobiographical graphic novel of Marjane Satrapi to provide a captivating experience. With a fascinating story about a girl who was raised during a revolution and a war, an unforgettable commentary that calls out authoritarian governments, a memorable protagonist with a lot of attitude and a lot of love, and beautiful animation that is a great example of being a living comic book, it presents how indie animation can be a great alternative to the mainstream ones by offering what you'll never find in major studios nowadays, as it takes big risks with themes and experimental styles. Yes, it does get into some serious subject matter, and the tone can get pretty heavy, but if you're willing to experience a movie that could be like that, then I highly recommend checking this out. There might even be a good chance that it could motivate you to become a political rebel. And by the way, if you had a great time with this, then give this review a like and come subscribe to my channel. We'll be looking into many more animated movies, but I promise that most will be more lighthearted than this film. It's always exciting when looking into these independent films and discovering what makes them hidden gems. And because I got to experience that again with Persepolis, I'm giving this the Animat seal of approval. Marjane went through a lot in her young age, but I'm glad that she shared her story with the world. Hey guys, this is Animat, and this is another example of why I love doing these reviews, because they give me an opportunity to go and check out some hidden gems that I have considered checking out, but now with these reviews, they give me an opportunity to have that experience, which is definitely the case with Persepolis. I've thought about wanting to go and see it, I finally have seen it, and now I love it. And by the way, before we go on to the next review, there is a fun fact that I do want to go and mention, and I think at this point, it should come as to no surprise that this movie is a little bit controversial. Yes, just like Marjane herself, there are times when it can get into a little bit of trouble, especially with the Iranian government. as you probably have seen in the movie, it does not hesitate to go and portray them a little bit antagonistically, especially with the authoritarian fundamentalists that would be in charge of the Iranian government. So when they have heard that this movie would go and portray them in a more negative light and actually call them out on their far-right extremism, they have tried on occasion to go and take down the picture to make sure that nobody would go and see this. Even before it had its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival, they would go and try to take action in order to go and censor it, to make sure it is hidden from the public, to make sure that nobody knows that the Iranian government are bad guys in this case. And funny enough though, not only did it not work, but Persepolis for a little bit, or at least during the time that it would be released in theaters and stuff like that, they actually used that to their advantage, where they actually used those moments and those attempts that the Iranian government tried to do and put that as their marketing, where they would go and put up in their posters and stuff like that by saying that this is the movie that Iran does not want you to see. And of course they would go and do that. I think it is also worth noting that considering that it was released back in 2007, this was during the time when it was near the end of the George W. Bush administration. And, well, unfortunately, it does come with a little bit of prejudice where the Middle East had this, well, the best way to describe it is that the Middle East were seen a bit antagonistically by the public. So, and, like, of course, nowadays we do know a lot better about that whole situation, but considering at the time, yeah, like it should come as to no surprise because of those controversies, and that they would use that as their marketing for a way to bring in Americans to go and say like, yeah, take that Middle East, take that Iran, and stuff like that. But anyways, all right, we're done with Persepolis, great movie, and now it is time that we shall go to a Patreon request. Yes, that is going to be where we shall have our next review. And this time, it shall be a request from Tom Jackson. So let me just go and start off by saying that if you would like to be like Tom and you want to go and support my work and get some amazing rewards, including but not limited to seeing my videos before anyone else, then all you have to do is go to patreon.com/animat. But at the same time, if you would like to suggest an animated film you would like me to review and that I would put onto the animation hat, then all you have to do is write me an email at animatsreviews@gmail.com. All right, so now with that said, what is it that Tom Jackson went to go and ask me to review? What is his request? Well, funny enough, it's actually going to be a sequel to a movie that I have reviewed a while back ago. It's been a little bit since I've seen the first movie, and when I went and reviewed it, I'll admit that I wasn't too big of a fan. I know that it had its following, and one of the prominent characters of that movie was definitely awesome, but as a film by itself, I get why it's not as appealing. But I do remember as a kid when I saw the second movie of this, I was actually more of a fan. In fact, when I had that VHS, I used it plenty of times to go and check that movie out. It's been quite a long time since I've seen this movie, but now it is time that I will be going back into that 2K with this upcoming review.
Don't forget, the struggle must go on, right?
Yeah, the struggle, right.